After that, without waiting for his reply, he got up and said, "Let's go. When you get to the yamen, you could tell me any grievances. I will certainly give you back. Please give you justice." Wu was a little embarrassed and annoyed. He pinched his palm and depressed his mood. "I just want justice. As for the form, it depends on the princess. So let's move." Mo Shanghua nodded slightly, and then got up to go forward first, while Yin Beicheng and others followed. When they arrived at the yamen, they explained to the magistrate in the yamen. Yin Xinchuan and Yin Beicheng sat on the court again. As the people involved in the matter, Mo Shanghua and Wu Ru stood at the bottom of the court together and said, "Your Highness is the inspector sent by the imperial city, just people, for the sake of fairness. Let's go down from the temple and make decisions." Wu Ru didn't have words, so he was acquiescent. Yin Xinchuan smells speech. The face is gentle, slightly gnawed. This temple will be fair. At this time, outside the court, the crowd had already been surrounded by layers of people. All the people stretched their necks to watch the show. Yin Beicheng took a cup of tea and sat on one side. His body was very loose. He leaned lazily on the back of his chair and yawned. "Princess, hurry up. Now it's time to have dinner. I'm hungry. Don't delay because of this." Mo Shanghua turned a white eye in her heart. There were not too many ups and downs on her face. She looked sideways at Wu Ru. "Master Wu, please say." Wu Ru came forward and looked ahead. "It's about my brother Wu Cheng. I think you've heard about it. The man sent by the palace said that he was killed by the bandits and died of poison. But it's not the case when he came back with my brother Wu Cheng." With that, he glanced at the young man in the royal guards who was following him. The young man came over and quickly turned around. He called one of the young men who followed Wu Ru. He came forward and looked at the flowers in the street. He really looked familiar. It should be Wu Cheng's personal servant. This man is my second brother's personal servant. He knows the situation of my second brother's death that day best. Wu Ru used his chin to point the little fellow, but his eyes were on the flowers. "Now let him talk about what he saw that day." "Yes." The young man knelt down in the hall, bowed his head, and said, "A while ago, I followed the second master to pass by Yuzhou City. Originally, I just stopped here for a while. Unexpectedly, there were bandits in Yuzhou and took away all our belongings. The second master was so angry that he went to the palace with other foreign businessmen to seek justice. I didn't expect Princess Yu to admit that she was someone else and had a holiday. Before long, Princess Yu was very angry. He also gave the second master a box of gold, and then drove the second master out of Yuzhou City overnight. After a pause, she raised her eyes and looked at the flowers on the street. Then she said, I just didn't expect that. Not long after we left the city, we met the group of bandits last time and were robbed by them again. At this time, Princess Yu suddenly led her soldiers to catch the group of bandits and sent officers and soldiers to catch the second master. But I didn't expect that, but the second master suddenly died. He fell to the ground and died. Later, the second master's body was detained in the palace by Princess Yu, but the slaves couldn't see it. Mo Shanghua quietly looked at the boy, thinking in his heart. When he spoke, he was clear-cut and didn't panic at all. He explained the cause and effect, but he didn't say that Wu Cheng had a festival with Mo Shanghua. I'm afraid that Wu Ru told him to avoid making too many mistakes. Wu Ru and the others waited for him to finish. Then he stepped forward and looked at Yin Xinchuan. Your Highness, all these things can show that Princess Yu is harmful to my brother. My brother always makes friends with others. Apart from offending Princess Yu after entering Yuzhou, she has no other enemy at all. She is the most likely one to do it alone. Before Yin Xinchuan opened his mouth, Yin Beicheng, who seemed to be careless, suddenly spouted all the tea out of his mouth, which attracted people's attention. Even the people in the hall looked at him. Seeing all the people looking at him, Yin Beicheng's smile showed no sign of concealing. He wiped the water stains on his lips and said with a smile, It's not my fault, but the words of Wu Ru are very interesting. It's like my king had a conflict with a man who only met him a few days ago, and he died in an accident the next day. You don't rush to find evidence to find out the cause of death, but you don't have to worry about it, because I have had a quarrel with him. I'm sure that I killed him. Should I say that he is stupid or stupid? The corner of the lips of the flower on the street can't help but gently curl up, and the eyebrows and eyes are dyed with a smile. Yin Sichuan also some can't help laughing, but still forced to suppress a smile away. The emperor brother said is good. You so doubt really not right. The muscle on Wu Ru's face twitched a little. He was not happy and said, I haven't finished my words yet. How does King you know that I'm from an empty hole? Say he lips cape treacherous light, hook a few minutes, turn round to see to oneself after death of close body small sea. The little guy immediately knew that he was busy and went down. After a while, he came back to Wu Ru with a wooden box in his hands. The little guy seemed to be afraid of something, and his hand with the wooden box was specially padded with hemp cloth, as if some fatal poison had been smeared on the wooden box. Look, everyone. Wu Ru twisted a piece of brocade cloth towel in his hand. He thought that the towel would open the wooden box, and the neat gold in the wooden box suddenly appeared. This gold was given by Princess when she drove my second brother out of the city. It was said that it was as compensation that the bandits could not recover. This gold seems to be no different, but after my inspection, I found that the gold was smeared with poison. Boys, it is also said that the second younger brother himself took the gold to check the number. I think it must have something to do with the death of my second younger brother. His eyes suddenly turned cold, and his words pointed to the flowers on the street. And this box of gold was sent by Princess Yu himself. Who can touch the gold besides her? What's more, if my second younger brother was really injured and killed by the robbers, why did the house of King Yu hold my second younger brother's body to prevent the boys from seeing him? There must be a ghost in it. If you don't believe it, you can invite more doctors to see if the gold surface has been smeared with poison. Yin Sichuan smell speech, eyebrow slightly congealed, turn Mao to look to the Mo Shanghua. This matter also can all depend on you one person's words. Huang Sa. What do you want to say? Of course I have something to say. Mo Shanghua stood up without hesitation. There was no panic in her eyes, and her red lips opened slightly. Wu Chang is not a man of the kingdom of God, and his identity is different in the kingdom of the moon. If something happened to him, his body should be preserved by the palace. If not, how can I explain to you then? Is there any other family's rule that when the master dies, the servants must watch the remains? Wu Ru choked. Unexpectedly, Mo Shanghua was so eloquent that he said, but gold is poisonous. How can you explain it? You don't have to say that this poison is from us. I heard before I came here that Princess Yu is the best at medical treatment, so it's not difficult for you to make it. Who told you that if you are good at medicine, you'll make drugs? The top of the eyebrows on the street was slightly raised, and the corners of the lips were slightly mocking. Why don't you invite all the doctors in the city and ask them, how many of them are drug makers? The difference between the two techniques, one killing and the other saving, must be known as soon as you hear it. Yin Beiqing took the handkerchief and wiped the water stains on his body. Although he didn't open his mouth, his deep eyes also wrote a bit of ridicule. He only sighed that the martial arts scholar was just so stupid. His princess was smart. He really cherished money when dealing with such a stupid person. Yin Sichuan looked at the flowers on the street, and he was shocked. If she is really not what she used to be, and her actions are so clear and bold, if she is what she used to be, she will only die to prove her innocence. After making such a low-level mistake, Wu Ru blushed a little and said, That's right. You can't deny the poison on the gold. I've asked several doctors to identify it. The poison didn't exist in the past 2 days. It must have existed before. Mo Shanghua Mao Guang glanced at the gold in the box and said calmly, In that case, can you let me identify it? Wu Ru consciously wanted to be open and above board in front of people, so he didn't mean to refuse. Naturally, it's okay, but what if you identify it? Is it difficult to understand that the poison on it can disappear? The implication is that Mo Shanghua might do something about it. Mo Shanghua only glanced at him and said, I'd like to invite the Imperial Dr. Liu to come and have a look. He's the Imperial Doctor of the Imperial City. His medical skills are obvious to all the people in Yuzhou. There's nothing wrong with him. Wu Ru's eyes swept over the people who were watching outside. Seeing that they were convinced, he thought that they were in another country after all, so he nodded. Seeing this, Mo Shanghua sent Qin Lin to invite Lu Zheng. After a while, he invited Lu Zheng over. Each of the two men twisted a piece of gold with his handkerchief and checked it in his hand. For a long time, the flower on the street just gave a smile and raised her eyes to Lu Zheng's eyes, which were also invisible. The smile on her lips was deeper, and the people who looked directly at her were puzzled. But Mo Shanghua was not in a hurry to explain. She put the gold back, wiped her hands with a handkerchief, and then slowly said, "The gold has been smeared with poison." It's true. Wu Ru heard the speech, but he didn't feel very happy. On the contrary, he was worried and looked at her tightly. I saw that the voice of Mo Shanghua, who had just said half of it, turned, but this poison is not a deadly poison. The toxicity is relatively mild. Even if it is smeared on the gold surface, it is not enough to kill people. Then, as if to prove her words, she twisted a piece of gold in her palm without any precautions and glanced at the boy who had talked before. Unless there is a wound on her hand, the poison can't corrode the human body. The boy shrunk his neck and took a look at Wu Ru's face. He saw his face was heavy and his eyes turned. He quickly raised his voice and said, "I remember that the master was in a bad mood the day before Princess you sent the gold. He smashed many porcelains and hurt his hands carefully. Maybe he was poisoned in this way." The mockery in Hua Mao's eyes was even more serious. He looked down at the young man. Wu Qing's body was examined when it was just delivered. It was poisoned. It's good. It's consistent with the poison on the gold, but if he has injuries on his hands. After a pause, her eyes glared fiercely. "When I did the test a few days ago, I didn't see it all. Your speech changed so fast. When I said it might be because of the injury on my hand, I immediately changed my tone. I see that you clearly have a ghost." The boy was flustered and turned to Wu Ru. "Master, I dare not lie. This princess is a pure frame-up." Seeing this, Wu Ru glared at the boy and continued. "He has been with his second brother for many years and will never do it. I think he is wrong. What's more, it's not the time to talk about this. Even if my second brother could not have died of contacting the gold, how can the poison on the gold be explained? Ask your people." Mo Shanghua glanced faintly and knelt down on the ground. He was a little boy with a pale face. "You might as well think about it. Although I have a character of revenge, I knew from the beginning that Xiao Wuqing had a special status in the Moon Kingdom. If he had something wrong in the Kingdom of God and broke the diplomatic relations between the two countries, even the king could not protect me. Why did I make such a mistake?" Wu Ru narrowed his eyes and lips. Seeing this, the young man quickly pulled the hem of Wu Ru's robe and said, "Master, you can't believe what this woman said. The second master said before he was alive that this woman is eloquent and can bewitch people. What I said just now is true. I dare not adulterate half of it. There are a lot of people outside watching. If Mo Shanghua orders people to pull down this little guy, he will be criticized. This little guy is bold and reckless. Even Yin Xinshuan and others frown." Mo Shanghua's face didn't change at all. She continued, "Besides, how stupid am I to make a move on the things I send? What's more, there are many loopholes in the gold poisoning. It is clear that someone deliberately framed it. No matter from any aspect, I think it is someone who deliberately wants to destroy the diplomatic relations between the two countries and make profits from them. This guy may be a gap between other countries." As she spoke, her eyes suddenly sank, and she turned to look at Yin Xinshuan. "Your Highness, Lord, I think we should immediately send someone to search this little guy's room in the post station. Maybe we can find some clues now. If it's true, as my sister-in-law speculated, it's the most important thing. Naturally, we need to thoroughly investigate it." Yin Xinshuan nodded, obviously had been convinced by his words. "Brother, this is your fiefdom. People naturally should be assigned by you." Yin Beicheng straightened the wrinkles on his clothes and then raised his eyes. There was an angry look between his eyes. "There is someone trying to frame the princess under my eyes. I can't forgive him easily. Come and explore the post station quickly." let alone this guy's room. The whole post station should be searched carefully. After a pause, he glanced at the boy and said, "This man's words and deeds are suspicious. Maybe there is something hidden in him. Search him as well." At the end of the speech, because Yin Beicheng and other people's arrival can only wait for the Yamen officials on one side to hurry up and repeat. The Yamen officers in the Yamen hurry up. Some people go to a light to search, and some people directly take the little guy to the ground and search him impolitely. After a short time, he went back to the hall to recover his life. He had a few banknotes in his hand. Besides, there was nothing else. Mo Shanghua took those banknotes and looked at them. When he saw the amount above, there were waves on his face. Then he showed all the banknotes in front of the crowd. "You see, this is a whole 2,000 taels of banknotes. How long can a little guy save so many banknotes without eating or drinking?" The boy's face suddenly changed, and he knelt down and straightened himself, regardless of the messy clothes he had just been turned over by the Yamen servants. "It's not my thing, master. I'm wronged." Shut Up Wu Ru was in a bad mood when he was refuted by Mo Shanghua. Seeing that the boy was so noisy, he couldn't help yelling. Then he looked at Mo Shanghua and said, "What princess you said is really reasonable. I'm afraid it's not enough." The flower on the street smiles a little, but there is no smile between her eyebrows. "Master Wu, don't worry. The person who went to search hasn't come back yet." Just then, the Yamen officers who had been sent out to search the post station also came back. One of them presented a neatly folded oil paper. The oil paper was not the size of a palm, which was similar to the oil paper used by Mozhang Huaping. There was nothing suspicious in the post station, only this one was hidden in the book under the corner of the table. On the street, Hua Qingsong took the oil paper and opened it slowly. Not surprisingly, what was wrapped in the oil paper was a white powder, but only a little bit less than the size of a thumb was left. Although we had not identified what it was, people knew it in their hearts. The boy turned pale and sat down on the ground, forgetting to complain. Mo Shanghua did not personally check what the powder was, but turned the powder to Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng took the powder and examined it carefully. Then he stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, Lord, this is the poison in Wuqing." Seeing the result, Yin Xinchuan breathed a sigh of relief and turned to Yin Beicheng, "Brother Huang, in this case, it's up to you to decide this case. However, this case is so important. I still want to write to my father and emperor, and I will surely find out the thief behind the attempt to destroy the diplomatic relations between the two countries." Naturally, Yin Beicheng immediately nodded as if he was pounding garlic, and just finished, he looked at the flowers on the street again. "Princess, look and do it. I've been sitting for such a long time. I'm hungry and dizzy. I really don't have much energy." "Don't worry, Your Highness." Mo Shanghua nodded slightly, then turned her eyes to Wu Ru. "Master Wu, you also heard that this matter is not just a personal complaint between you and me. This matter is related to the diplomatic affairs between the two countries. This person should be handed over to us to deal with, and the person in charge of Wu Cheng's death should be the person who wants to stir up the fight between the two countries behind it." Wu Ru is not as impulsive and brainless as Wu Cheng. He knew that there was no room for him to return. He immediately recognized the facts and said, "In this case, I hope the princess can find out the culprit as soon as possible so that my second brother can know about it and be able to close his eyes." After a pause, he leaned down slightly and bowed his hand to the flower on the street. "I believe this villain wrongly and wronged the princess. I hope the princess will not care with me. Those who don't know are innocent. Master Wu, please get up." Mo Shanghua, Su helped Wu Ru, but he didn't mean to blame him. "Just a little bit. This matter is very important, and it's no longer within my jurisdiction. I think the emperor will send someone to investigate this matter in a few days. Although you can rest assured, the emperor will surely give you an explanation." However, after a few words, he successfully threw the pot to others, which made Wu Ru choke. He said with a dry smile, "Yes, thank you for your hard work." As the voice fell, he seemed to think of something, and then said, "Since the matter here has come to an end for the time being, can the princess take me to see my second brother's body? That's my brother, after all. I always want to take him back to his roots. I'm going to fulfill the Master Wu's wishes." The flower on the street gave a faint smile. She took a look among the people who were talking about it outside the government office. She turned her eyes and said, "It's just that the Lord is also lacking. You'd better go back to the palace with us. I'll take you to see the body of the second master of the Wu family." "Thank you." The Confucianists have no different words, and their words are respectful and polite. When they went out from the main gate, the crowd who had gathered outside the yamen spontaneously retreated to both sides for them to pass. From the crowd through the extreme, Imo Shanghua vaguely heard that these people who originally had malice against her and were ashamed of her had changed their words. "I don't think the princess is as bad as everyone said. The manner of solving the case is very powerful. I'm afraid the ordinary county magistrate can't match it." "Don't mention it. I'll see it. Besides, the princess is a white girl. She doesn't care about the person who offends him. How could such a thing happen to such a generous person? I think you are all fascinated. You can't judge her appearance. She must have done it for us." Mixed words into the ear, but no change in the color of the flowers. Only in the heart quietly thinking, now how to temporarily block the news here. She thought, Yinsenchuan, Yinbei City, 2 people have been on their respective carriages, but she still stopped under the carriage, did not get on. Seeing her eyes wandering around on the street, Qinya couldn't help looking along her eyes, but didn't find anything strange. She said, "Princess, what are you looking at? The Lord is still waiting for you." Imo Shanghua raised his hand and made a hissing gesture. Mao Guang finally settled in front of a restaurant not far away, which was just opened. He said, "Qinya, come here." Qinya saw that she was serious, so she went to her side and said in a low voice, "Princess, please tell me." Imo Shanghua took out a few silver tickets from her sleeve and put them into Qinya's hands. Then she lowered her voice and gave orders in a voice that only 2 people could hear. Then she moved the lip from Qinya's ear and said, "If you can't do it yourself, you can call Qin Lin as a helper. This is my token. You can take my token and go back to the house later." Qinya put away the banknote and token, and then blessed herself. She patted her chest and promised, "This is so simple. I can do it alone. Princess, you can rest assured. It's really not difficult." Qinya spent so long with Imo Shanghua. Imo Shanghua naturally feels at ease with her. Seeing this, she doesn't ask much. She gets on the carriage and leaves with Yan Beichen. The troops of the royal family have just gone far away, and the people who have just watched are ready to disperse when they see that there is no more excitement to watch. Seeing this, Qinya quickly went to these people, pinched her voice, and said, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." She has just been following Imo Shanghua. Naturally, everyone knows that she is Imo Shanghua's maid, so they all stop to see her. However, some people seem not to hear her and ignore her at all. Qinya was a little anxious. She squeezed her hand and sped up her voice. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's a new restaurant in front of us. Our princess wants to invite you all to have a taste. Of course, the wine and food are all paid by our princess. Please do appreciate it." With that, he specially took out the silver note that Imo Shanghua had just given her and shook it in front of the crowd. Such a good thing has never happened in 800 years. These people are just ordinary people. Naturally, they are very happy when they encounter such a good thing. They just feel that they have picked up such a big bargain, and they are busy scrambling to follow them. Even some 100 surnames who were just passing by have hurriedly gathered together to wait for the bargain. Qinya looked at the more and more people gathered. As she pulled a smile, she led everyone to the restaurant. She pinched the silver note in her hand and murmured in a low voice, "What's the idea of the princess? I'm afraid it's going to be a big loss this time." "Madam, the princes and the princesses are back." Shueji's maid stood outside the mansion for a long time, waiting for the news she wanted to wait for. She trotted all the way back to tell him, in addition to her 13 highnesses, there is also an old man who looks at his face. Although her clothes are very expensive, they don't seem to be the clothes of the people of the kingdom of God. She has shallow knowledge and can't tell which country's clothes are. In Shueji's heart, The corners of her lips must be slightly raised. It doesn't matter. You just need to tell me what the look of the prince and his 13 Highness is, and where they went after they came back. His Royal Highness is still as gentle and polite as before, but the maidservant's face seems not very good. So does the princess. The maid raised her eyes and looked at Shueji's face. Then she tentatively said, I'm looking at where I'm going. I'm going to the hall. Well, get ready. I'm going to see the Lord. By the way, don't forget to bring the hibiscus powder you bought a few days ago. Shueji answered with a smile. The maid answered and went down to prepare. Lord, Your Highness, let's have dinner first. I'll take the master of Wu family to see the body. Before arriving at the hall, Imo Shanghua stopped, left a sentence with a smile, turned his eyes to see Wu Ru, and then turned to leave. Wu Ru saw this and bowed his hands to Yin Sichuan in the north city of Yin. Then he went with Imo Shanghua. Imo Shanghua didn't use Lu Zhang's suggestion before, but asked him for the method he used to preserve Yunji's body. He saved Wu Cheng's body for the time being. When Wu Ru saw Wu Cheng's body was still intact. But as soon as Wu Ru saw the body, he rushed to the body and cried, but he didn't care to look around. The flowers in the street were watching. Wu Ru was heartbroken, but he didn't shed tears for a long time. He didn't feel irony in his heart. A big family like the Wu family must have a dispute over property. When Wu Chengsheng was born, I was afraid that it was too late for Wu Ru to hate him. After his death, he acted like this in front of people. Apart from tears, he also pretended to be so like this. It seems that he was really sad. It can be seen that there is no reason why he has been in charge of the Wu family for more than 10 years. Imo Shanghua is still observing Wu Ru's crying, but Shueji is already in Yin Sichuan's face. She sincerely asked for love for her. Mr. Wang, I heard that the master of the Wu family came to me. It seems that it was because of the death of the second master of the Wu family, Wu Cheng. Snow Ji-fu body line of ceremony. Mao Guang swept in the main hall for a while. On the face immediately exposed a bit of doubt. I don't see the princess and that Wu family, too, master. Could it be that? Have you been convicted and imprisoned? Yin Beiqing had just sat down and had not yet ordered to pass the meal. He could not help nodding impatiently and said, yes. Shueji's face suddenly changed when she heard the words. She quickly admonished her. My lord, I know that you are in a dilemma, but the princess is your wife after all. No matter how big a mistake she has made, you should also think about the love between husband and wife and be tolerant. Yin Sichuan can't help but light frown, some confused looking to Yin Beicheng. Yin Beicheng didn't answer, just like he found something interesting. He leaned back and looked at Shueji quietly. When Shueji saw this, she felt that Yin Beicheng was not moved, as if she had made a decision in her eyes. Beichi bit her lip and knelt down with her skirt. My lord, it's all my servant's fault. I'm the second master of the Marshall family. My sister is unjust. If you have to punish me, I'll punish my servant. This matter has been understood, but Shueji is crying here, and all the people in the hall are confused, especially Yin Sichuan. But at the same time he was confused, he felt more strange in his heart. After thinking about it, he said, You are the concubine of the emperor's brother. You said that you did all these things. Do you have any proof? On one side, Yin Beicheng seemed to be playing with him and said, I only heard that you were always close to the princess, but I didn't know that when the princess made a mistake, you should try your best to take the next step. His eyebrows seemed casual, but no one could see them. There was a dark color at the bottom of his eyes. Si Yin Sichuan want to take out the certificate. Snow Ji Dun went along, complexion slightly flustered. Maidservant concubine has personally admitted. Do you still need what certificate? Said. She directly bent over the forehead, deeply buckle on the ground. Prince, the princess is really innocent. You want to punish the servant concubine one person. Servant concubine willing to accept. Madam Dash, the maid kneeling behind Shueji said, Yes. Before she finished, Shueji got up quickly and yelled, There's no part of your speech here. You'll step down immediately. In this way, nature is particularly attractive. When Yin Beicheng sees this, He can hardly cooperate. Yu says, "Stop and make clear what you just want to say." Smell speech. That maidservant hasn't how. Snow G's complexion has already gradually pale up. The blood color on the face faded clean. Seeing this, the maidservant couldn't care more. She straightened up and said angrily, "Wang Yi, that Wu Qing is a foreigner. How can we poison him if our wife doesn't come out of the gate or step out of the gate? It can't be my wife's doing this. Don't believe what she said. She's pleading guilty for others." "Shut up and stop talking." Xueji turns around and grabs the maid's arm. She can't help yelling again. "It's interesting." Yin Beiqing leaned over the armrest of the chair, supported his chin with one hand, and said with interest, "Xueji, don't interrupt her. I want to hear that you are so painstaking. Who do you want to answer for?" Yin Sichuan didn't speak, but looking at his expression, what he thought his heart was roughly the same. With Yin Beiqing's words, the maidservant's waist is more straight, and she is not afraid of Xueji's obstruction. She looks so serious, but she has to say something, but she can't spit it out for a long time. "I beg your pardon." Seems to see the maid's hesitation. Yin Sichuan is very understanding of the warm voice. The maid then had the confidence and said, "Report back to the prince, Your Highness, madam. She is just taking the blame for the princess." Then she knelt forward a few steps, pulled up Xueji's arm, rolled up part of her broad sleeve robe, revealing the delicate white skin under the robe. However, on the white skin, there are several scabby wounds, the size of red beans, and several reddish scars. It seems that they were all injured by a kind of utensil. However, only for a moment, Xueji quickly struggled to take back her arm, arranged the position of her sleeve, and said, "Lord, don't listen to the girl's nonsense. Lord, you see, this is what the princess left in our wife's hands." But the maid refused to stop and continued, "Everyone in the house knows that the princess is vicious, and no one dares to be close to the princess. Only Xueji is different. What do you think is the reason? It's not our poor wife who can only rely on the princess in order to protect herself. These injuries are tied by the princess's hairpin when she is not happy. In fact, it has nothing to do with our wife. Before, the princess wanted our wife to help him poison Wu Cheng. When she was rejected by her wife, the princess moved her hand in anger. However, as soon as the matter came to light, she immediately threatened her with her relatives and asked her to help her take the blame. "Don't wrongly treat our wife, Lord." The more she said, the more excited she was. By the time she came back, she was very excited. She leaned down and put her forehead on the ground. "How can you find all the people? Do you know that you're going to trap me in an unfilial place like this? If there is something wrong with my father and mother." Xueji maidservant all said, the body can't help but gently shaking, biting the pale lips, eyes timid mouth. All the people in the room were staring at the moment, with an unbelievable color on their face. If it wasn't for Yin Beicheng, Yin Sichuan would have fried the pot. Yin Sichuan stared at the master and servant of Xueji kneeling below for a while. He was a little suspicious in his eyes and said, "Brother, this matter can't be decided by a few words of them." Yin Beicheng nodded at random, but his brows were already dyed with the right color. "I always know the princess's character. She doesn't look like someone who would do such a vicious thing. The prince is the master of the mansion. Even the princess should be respectful to you. Naturally, you can't see anyone else." The maidservant was very smart. Hearing the words, she said again, "Who knows in the palace? The princess is always harsh to the servants. Since the princess entered the palace, everyone is holding their heads. There are so many people in the government who are dissatisfied with me. I don't know. Thanks to your reminding." As soon as the voice fell, I heard the cold, frosty voice from the outside. I was so scared that my maid was shocked. Subconsciously, I bit my mouth tightly and didn't dare to say more. Xueji can't help looking up at the flowers on the street who just stepped into the house. When she looks inside her eyes, she rushes into a layer of unbelievable color, and her eyebrows jump fiercely. She only feels that things are beyond her control. Think of here. Don't wait for Emma Shanghua to speak again. She quickly stood up with the skirt, came forward to grasp Imo Shanghua's hand, full of surprise. "Sister, are you okay? I know that my sister is lucky and will be fine." Seeing this, the maidservant turned her eyes around. She dropped her eyes, but the smart one didn't open her mouth. Yin Beicheng propped his chin and looked at the dramatic scene as if he were watching a play. Yin Sichuan also seems to see something, silent, looking at people, no plan to interrupt. Imo Shanghua's eyes were fixed on Xueji, who was in front of her. She took her hand out of her hand and said, "I can't say that it's good for human and nature. At most, it's just a thought. However, Xueji, why are you so nervous and excited? I remember that my relationship with you seems not to be so good." Xueji took back her hands awkwardly and tried to pull out a smile. "Well, my sister said, we are both sisters serving the Lord together. I naturally care about your safety." "Is it?" Imo Shanghua, tone slightly up, voice cool mouth. "In this case, how can you still allow your little maid here wantonly slander me?" Before Xueji could make a speech, she asked herself, "Oh, yes, you seem to have stopped me a little bit, but a master can't command his slaves. Is it because the rules of the palace are too lax? Or is it not that you don't listen to me, but that the master can't stand my abuse by her mouth? Do you want to falsely accuse the Lord?" Snow G face immediately did not smile. Staring at the flowers, eyes look constantly change. It's just that she's on the verge of success now, so she has to fight. Instead of stopping halfway, she'd better fight now. If she fails, she's trying to escape. Thinking of this, she could not help biting her teeth and kneeling down in front of Yinbei's city again. The prince and the princess are right. I really want to borrow my maid's mouth, but I dare not frame up the princess. I'm just depressed and want to take the opportunity to ask the princess to be the master. After a pause, she looked sad. Since my concubine came to the palace, the king seldom called me. I just wanted the king to cherish me more. When Yin Beicheng heard the words, he twisted his sword eyebrows into his temples and looked at the flowers on the street. She said that the king's head is big. Princess, or for you, is it true? Of course not. Imo Shanghua's mouth was crisp and clear. In the middle of the conversation, the front of the conversation suddenly changed. However, since she said that, she must be prepared. You might as well take out to have a look, lest there is too little evidence to see. In this way, Xueji was laughing at her. She felt a little annoyed in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She said, "My concubine just said that the princess often stabbed me with a hairpin when she was angry. This hairpin was unintentionally left when the princess quietly came to command me at night a few days ago. Please have a look at it." She took out a simple silver hairpin without any pendant from her sleeve and spoke eloquently. Smart little C.C. this quickly came forward to take the hairpin and submitted to Yin Beicheng. Yin Beicheng took the hairpin and looked at it. Then he raised his eyes and looked at it in the simple bond on the street. His brow wrinkled more tightly. "Princess, I remember, it seems that it's really your hairpin." When Yin Sichuan heard the speech, he felt tight in his heart and said, "Ordinary women often lose their hair. If the princess loses a hairpin carelessly, what's so strange? According to this hall, it's not enough as evidence." "It makes sense." Yin Beicheng nodded and threw the hairpin aside. "If you can take out the evidence, I will make the decision for you." "Of course." Xueji bit her lip, and a certain amount of self-confidence came out of her eyes and eyes. Since the princess came to the mansion, she first went crazy, then drove away the housekeeper and punished Pingji. Now she has committed the second master of the Wu family. All in all, she has made many people dissatisfied in the mansion, including many people outside the city. The flowers on the street picked the corners of their lips, and there was a certain irony and fearlessness between their eyebrows and eyes. "No matter what's right or wrong, I did it on purpose. What's the matter with the people in the city? It's not that she is too self-centered, but that she always thinks that no matter what she does, it's all her business, and other people are not qualified to talk about it." However, in Xueji's eyes, it is extremely arrogant. The princess is the hostess of Yuzhou. What you say and do is related to the whole palace and the whole face of Yuzhou. How can it be your own business? Shueji turned her eyes slightly and continued. Now, the people think that the princess is immoral and unworthy of being the princess of Yuzhou, so they signed the letter of Wanmin and asked the prince to have a look at it. However, they are unable to deliver it. There is a distant uncle of my maid and concubine who is looking for a job in the royal palace. The letter of Wanmin is in the hands of my maid and concubine's uncle. However, my uncle is afraid that he might leak the news and make the princess want to kill him. The book was given to my maid. Lord, even if you don't want to listen to your maidservant and concubine, you have to listen to thousands of people. The flower eyes on the street just dyed some Sioux color. It's like knowing Shueji for the first time. I look at Shueji seriously. Yin Sichuan is also the same shock. Heart seems to follow it tight. Busy asked, "What do you say, Wanmin book?" Shueji pondered for a while, then said, "It's the people, but it's not too much to say it's 1,000 people. But in order to prevent the Wanmin book from being leaked, I simply asked Nanji elder sister to take care of it for me. The prince can invite her to take care of the Wanmin book for the time being." Nana was also involved. Yin Beiqing's eyes suddenly passed a heavy color, but his face was blank. 13 younger brother, what is the book of the people? Yin Sichuan was quite nervous at the moment, but he didn't show any impatience when he heard Yin Beiqing's words. Wan Sheng explained, "In short, it's the common wish of millions of people. With this, we should focus on small things, even our father and emperor." Having said that, it is extremely difficult to get a book of the people's. Everyone's thoughts are different. It's very difficult to connect others with their own. It is also a reflection of the long-cherished wish of many people, and a superior can't just sit back and ignore it. Yin Beiqing nodded his head, and his eyes turned around Shueji's body. Then he said, "Go and have a look first." Shueji smelled speech, busily lift eyes to see to own intimate maid. You, when the person that the Lord sends go together. I remember the south side imperial concubine seems to be received in the mattress interlayer between, should not be very difficult to find, quickly go back. Yes, I'm sure I'll bring up some concubines from the south. Sea Snow G Mao Light Sean seem to have what meaning to want to express, in the heart immediately understand come over. Finish saying, that maidservant then followed the small sea that Yin North City sends to go together. When Nanny saw the maid, his eyebrows could not help jumping. "If you don't wait on your wife, how can you come to me? And this one, shouldn't you also serve the Lord?" The servant girl blessed the south crane and said, "Side concubine, it's the prince who asked the servant girl to accompany her to pick up the book of the people." My wife said, "I remember you took it in the interlayer of the quilt last time. Please take it yourself quickly." "Cunt, you've got it." It seems that she doesn't trust her at all. She wants to take her into the water when things fail. At the thought of this, she was very angry, but she couldn't show any anger at the moment, so she nodded, got up, and went around the screen to the bedside. She touched the sheet with her hands, then lifted the sheet. She saw that there was something like a memorial under the intrusion. Then she took it out and went out to smile at the maid. "The book of the people is here. Let's go." As he followed the servant girl to the hall, then he scolded Shueji for her cunning and her escape strategy later. When Nanha took Wanmin's book, Shueji's nervousness gradually faded away. Her eyes relaxed a little, and her words became more and more calm. "Prince, my concubine will put these important things in the place of Nanbian imperial concubine. First, Nanbian imperial concubine is deeply loved by you, and she is the most important person in the government besides the royal concubine. Second, this is what Nanbian imperial concubine asked for." Fearing that Nanha would argue, she sped up and continued. "Nanbian princess is usually such a gentle and dignified person. She is also very angry with the princess. Otherwise, Nanbian princess would not help her. Sister, do you think so?" Speaking of this, Nanha naturally had to eat the dumb loss and knelt down. "Lord, I dare not ask the princess. I just want peace in the house for a while, and I want you not to be criticized." "Well said," the sisters. "Two people are you a word, a language of say." Pingji's sharp voice then spread from outside come in. "The person didn't arrive, the language first arrive." Lord. Pingji twisted her body and walked in. Her eyes first swept over Yin Sichuan's pretty cheek and then fell on Yin Beiqing's face. She blessed her body and said, Lord, do you know that not only the two sisters, but also many maidservants and concubines are bullied by the princess? And she pinched her handkerchief and began to sob. I just said a few more words to the princess a few days ago, which made the princess unhappy. The princess insisted that I was guilty of the following crimes. She was disrespectful to her and punished me. Another month ago, I was punished by the princess. You must be the master for me and thousands of people. It's the only way to abolish this poisonous woman. Yan Beiqing, some irritable, grabbed the broken hair of the forehead, impatiently scolded. All shut up. My king, listen to the head will ache to death. Pingji Si, full of tears in the eyes, played a few turns. Should be forced to go back, dare not make a sound. Nana glances at Xueji kneeling on the ground, pinches her palm, and kneels down beside her. Although he doesn't say a word, his attitude is very obvious. Seeing this, Pingji knelt down quickly. Yin Sichuan was weak and easy to sweat. At the moment, seeing their posture, he felt as if they were forcing Yin Beiqing to punish himself, and his palm was sticky. Brother, you have to report to your father and emperor to abolish the imperial concubine. Don't be impulsive. Otherwise, your father and emperor will blame you, and you will be in trouble. Xueji smells speech, busy way. If the emperor know the reason, certainly won't blame the Lord. At the moment, Yin Beiqing, in the state of no ordinary slouch, has already tightened his eyebrows and lips tightly, with a sad look. When others see this, they all know that he is also measuring, and they dare not speak more. The house is like an invisible funnel. Everyone is quietly waiting for the sand in the funnel to leak out and usher in the final judgment. Pooh! Suddenly, there was a sneer in the quiet room, and everyone could not help looking in the direction of the sound source. See, originally all want to be forced to the end of the road of Mo Shanghua at this moment on the face, but no half-cent nervous flustered color. On the contrary, added a bit of ironic smile. Is it difficult for the princess to see that the general situation has gone, and she is directly scared out of her wits? Seeing this, Pingji gently raised her lips and opened her mouth with some satisfaction. Mo Shanghua didn't even look at her, so she stepped directly in front of Nan He. Didn't you say you brought the Book of the People? Now, even the Book of the People has not been shown. I want to judge my guilt at will. I'm afraid it's not enough to convince the public. The South Crane Mao light in Mo upper flower face, slightly one eye, the heart shoe but jumped. She always felt that it was not so simple. After all, when did Xueji put the book in? She didn't know. How could she know if it was the real book? Thinking of this, she was more and more uneasy. But now, how can she continue to hide the book? She can only slowly take out the book from her sleeve. Before handing the flowers to Mo Shang, she could not help pausing in her hands, and the light in her eyes flickered. Princess, it's better to present this to your highness, and let them decide in person. Mo Shanghua smells speech, simply straight backhand. Good, for don't let you suspect, this book is naturally Wang Ye read after I read. She glanced at the little guy standing behind Yin Beiqing. He came over and quickly took the Wanmin book from Nan He and presented it to Yin Beiqing. The Wanmin book is as long as more than 10 pages of paper. Yin Beiqing alone is not enough to completely unfold it. Seeing this, the young man quickly called another young man to come over, and the two of them worked together to completely unfold the Wanmin book. I saw that the Book of Peoples, which was more than 1 meter long, was full of names written in different handwriting. Then he felt relieved. Pingji craned her neck, and then she saw a corner of Wanmin's book, and her lips suddenly raised. Lord, this matter should be decided, right? If you don't have the heart, the emperor will make a decision. This woman doesn't deserve to be a princess. Her heart has long been on the flower hate to the extreme. She is also a concubine in her family. She can only send her concubine. This slut is also a concubine. Why can she be the concubine of her own family? Yin North City, Mao color gradually sink down. Mao light over the book of the people, fixed in the mo Shanghua delicate cheek for a long time, did not speak. Yin Sichuan almost stood up, thanks to Chun Kong quietly pressed him. However, the worry in his heart has not been reduced by half because of this. However, apart from this worry, there's also something in his heart hope. In fact, he wanted to get rid of the quilt in his heart. In this way, he has a chance. No, she said, she is no longer Lu Qianqian. Now she is called Mo Shanghua. She is totally different from Lu Qianqian. Yin Sichuan pinched the sleeve robe, pursed the bloody lip, and fell into the self-entanglement. But there was no panic on the side of Mo Shanghua. His eyes turned around in the house, and then he walked slowly to the side of Yin Beicheng. He pointed to the words in front of the book of the people and read it out slowly. Yuzhou bandits are rampant, the horses are weak, the soldiers are short, the people are suffering, and the people are hard to live. Although our strength is weak, we still ask your majesty to make a decree earlier and allow Yuzhou to recruit troops and protect us. The common people are considerate. Li Dainiu and Wang Ersan. Yin Beicheng's eyes didn't change at all, as if he had expected this matter, but he made an unbelievable appearance on his face. He blinked and looked at the direction of the flower on the street. His lips couldn't help ticking a few points. Nanha and Pingji both turned their heads and stared at Xueji, as if to ask what's the matter. However, Xueji's face was also unbelievable, and she obviously didn't know anything about it. Yin Sichuan returned to his senses and immediately fixed his eyes on the place where the flower had just read. He was surprised at first, but although the string in his heart was loose, he was not happy. Mo Shanghua's attention was focused on the people kneeling down. He didn't pay attention to others. He spoke quietly. Lord, you see, it's a book of the people. It's good, but it's a book of the people petitioning His Majesty. What does it have to do with me? Yin Beicheng asked people to put away the petition for the time being. Then he asked Xueji, Nanha, and others, Xueji, what's the crime of deliberately setting up the princess? Xueji's face suddenly changed. She pinched the palm of her hand and calmed her mind. She said, My lord, I must have been cheated. Besides, is it an indisputable fact that the princess abused me? Including the previous death of Yunji, it's not an accident. In fact, the princess gave me the poison powder before she left in order to settle the trouble of Yunji. When I didn't comply with the poison, she repeatedly threatened my parents' lives. With that, she quickly took out a small bag of poison powder from her sleeve. This is what was used before. The second master of the Wu family died in the hands of the princess, which should be the poison. The lord can invite the doctor to have a look. Xiao Si presented the small package of poison. Yin Beicheng was afraid of being poisoned, so he just picked up a corner and looked at it at will. Yin Sichuan also gathered to have a look. The Mao light tiny turn. Emperor elder brother, still invite the doctor to come over to have a look. Don't bother. Mo Shanghua interrupts him without looking at the powder bag and says, Qin Lin, please come up to Xueji's parents. The word parents was particularly bitten by her, which had special meaning. Qinya outside the door answered and waited for a while before leading two middle-aged couples in common clothes. The middle-aged couple had obviously never seen the world. As soon as they came in and saw so many well-dressed dignitaries, they were afraid to say more. They just knelt down and didn't know whether they were talking to Yin Beicheng or Yin Sichuan. Since the incident of Yunji, I have been suspicious of Xueji. I sent someone to investigate Xueji's life experience. I learned that her parents are ordinary people in Wujuan, and there are 4 younger brothers at home. Because life is really hard, I entrusted her distant uncle and sent her to the government as a concubine. After that, Xueji never contacted her parents again. In the middle, she suddenly thought of something and stretched out her hand to Qin Lin. Qin Lin quickly took out 2 small wooden cards and handed them to Mo Shanghua. She borrowed the wooden card and put it in front of Yin Beicheng, saying, This is their household card, which can fully prove their identity. What is it to do? Are you here to meet someone? Yan Beicheng glanced at the household post in front of his desk and asked in a casual voice. Exactly. This is a joke, but think of Imo Shanghua instead solemnly nodded his head, raised his finger to the snow, G kneeling on the ground. 2. Please see. This is your daughter in the end. Two people submissive should be. This just will hate can't bury in the ground of head up. Stare at snow G to see. After a long time, the woman suddenly called out, surprised and indignant. No, 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 my daughter works with me all the year round. How could she be a good-looking woman? No, no, she's not my daughter. What about my daughter? That old man sees this. Complexion is also particularly at a loss. This is how to return a responsibility after all. My daughter? Don't worry. The princess will give you justice later. Follow me first. Seeing this, Qin Lin quickly came forward to appease them and help them down. At the moment, Shueji's face is completely pale, She could not help trying to struggle for a while, and said, the food in the palace is much better than the environment I used to live in. It's not strange that I've been raised a little whiter. Moreover, it's inevitable that my parents will be dazed when they are old. You've been in the palace for less than a year, and you've been weak and out of favor all the time. When I first entered the palace, you didn't come to see me because of illness. I'm curious. How can you have time to take care of yourself if you can't get well? What's more, your position, where can you get the white and pure medicine that can be raised quickly? The corner of the lips of the flowers on the street is hooked, and the eyebrows are dyed with a kind of light color. What's more puzzling is that the woman just said that her daughter works with her all the year round. I have asked her in private that her daughter is healthy and won't get sick several times a year. Now how can she become so delicate as soon as she enters the government? The flowers on the street closed their eyes and made up another sentence. Shueji's eyes flickered for a while, and her hands were very flustered. She grabbed her robes, but she was still calm. My hometown used to be in Wujuan, far away from Yuzhou City. When she first came here, she was not acclimatized. Later, she was very emotional, so she was ill for a long time. After a pause, her eyes flashed, and she said, there are so many women in the house, or someone is afraid that I will be spoiled by the Lord, so it's better to start first and deliberately frame me. Think about it. You don't see the coffin, you don't cry. Imo Shanghua smell speech. Turn out to see to the side of Qin Lin. Will Snow Ji in the House of Medical Records? Yes. Qin Lin answered, then took out a pamphlet in his chest, raised his hands over his head, and presented it to Yin Beicheng. To the prince, the princess had expected that. So she specially sent a slave to transfer Mrs. Shue's medical records. From her entering the government to now, all the medical records and pathology are here. Yin Beicheng showed a little fidgety on his face. He only waved to let Imo Shanghua down, but he didn't look at it. Yin Sinshuan didn't look at it. Her eyes fell on Imo Shanghua, but she didn't look at him. She said, it's clearly recorded in the medical record that you were not acclimatized at the beginning, but after a few days of recuperation, you will be almost cured. But in the days after that, you will have a minor illness in 3 days and a serious illness in 5 days. You will suffer from wind and cold or lose your body, and you will only be cured in the house. I think it's a fake you've made to hide people's eyes and ears. Princess, Shueji's mind suddenly changed, and she cried out, I'm just confused for a moment. So, I came to the Lord to tell you. But you don't need to do this. I'll kill you. The maid and concubine are willing to apologize to the princess, so she will stay in the hospital from now on. Without taking a step, I hope the princess will forgive her and her parents. Then he bent over and knocked his forehead heavily on the ground. You can't change the evidence in a few words. The temperature of the flour noodles on the street dropped down, and his voice was cold. Please judge. Wang, Lord, Shueji, just open her mouth. Nanha suddenly opened his mouth and knelt to the front. This man pretends to be a concubine in the palace and has been in the palace for such a long time. It must be a fine work sent by other countries. This move is so cruel, sinister, and malicious. You better make a decision early. As for the concubines, they are so stupid that they are easily provoked and willing to be punished. So although it's far-fetched, Nanha is absolutely confident that Yan Beiqing will never do anything to her. After all, when it's time to use her chess piece, it can be used naturally. Pingji originally came here to fall into the well. She didn't know what the situation was. Now, she saw that Nanha turn his back and pinched his sweating palm. She said, "I'm also biased. I've been tricked by this man. I almost became an accomplice to the princess. I hope the king will punish me at the same time." That said, but in the eyes, apart from a little flustered and timid, where there is half sincerity. Shueji can't help looking at them and gritting her teeth. The two elder sisters said so. Don't they put me in a place of injustice, Lord, I'm wronged. You must find out the truth and make decisions for me. At present, there are all kinds of human and material evidence, and it is useless for Shueji to deny it. Therefore, Imo Shanghua only glances at the dying people and has no intention to continue to speak. Yin Sichuan's Mao Guang turns around on Imo Shanghua's cheek. Seeing that her face is light, she can't see any emotional ups and downs. Her heart suddenly becomes transparent, and the Mao Guang can't help getting more and more complicated. Brother. When he was here, he couldn't help. In other words, he didn't need help at all. He simply stood up and said, "I don't feel well, so I won't be accompanied by dinner. Since I'm not feeling well, I'm going to have a good rest. Come and send my brother back." Yin Beiqing nodded at random and agreed. Yin Sichuan nodded slightly and then walked away. When he passed in front of Imo Shanghua subconsciously avoided. His eyes suddenly coagulated on her for a few minutes. After a long time, he tried to suppress the emotion in his heart, closed his eyes, turned, and walked out. Although Imo Shanghua didn't lift her eyes, she deeply felt Yin Sichuan's hot eyes, but she didn't look sideways. She only felt the special embarrassment in her heart. Yin Sichuan's mind, she can roughly guess a few points, but she is not the original owner. Such feelings fall on her body, will only make her uncomfortable and feel guilty. Yin Beicheng glanced at the flower's cheek, but for a moment he looked away and said, "Since it's made by other countries, it's natural that we can't tolerate it. Come and put Shueji in the dungeon." As for the South Imperial concubine and Pingji, at this point, he felt his chin and thought hard for a long time. Then he said, "What's that word called?" Move. Gossip. Seeing Beicheng already in the disposal of this matter. Imo Shanghua, this just not slow mouth prompt. "Oh yes, gossiping." Yin Beicheng patted himself on the head, and then, as if he found himself embarrassed, he covered his lips and coughed softly. Well, they were gossiping and echoing, so they were punished for half a year. Kneeling below, the two people have not yet had time to relax. The flowers on the street will not smile, and added, "Lord, Pingji's month as early as the previous few mistakes, then buckle all." Pingji has not put down the gas immediately is a mention. Life suffocated in the throat, face ugly to the extreme. But Yin Beicheng just didn't care about it and said, "Since that's the case, I'll take her next year's one. If it's really not good, I'll try to make it." This time, Pingji almost cried out. Previously, she had been designed by Imo Shanghua and sent her a large number of valuable medicinal materials. Her little treasury had no money left, and there had been no monthly rules. That is to say, she didn't have to worry about food and drink in the house, but she didn't have spare money, so how could she live? "My lord, I don't agree with you." Think of here, Mao Guang can't help but vent a bit of resentment, hated a glance at Imo Shanghua, and then looked at the side of Nanji. If the maid concubine want to use the things in the hospital to arrive, that's Southside Imperial concubine, the crime of her instigation is much heavier than that of her maidservant and concubine. If you don't punish her severely, the whole family will not accept it. Imo Shanghua knew the identity of Nanhi early, but she only realized that Yin Beicheng would never punish Nanhi severely and would certainly save the chess piece. Knowing this, she simply opened her mouth for Yin Beicheng, but naturally she would not be a good person in vain. Non-being imperial concubine has always been modest and docile, but you are arrogant, disrespectful everywhere, which is different from you. Imo Shanghua looked down at her, and glanced at her contemptuously. If you say one more thing, you can save it for the king's residence for public use in the next few years. Pingji Hate glanced at the flower on the road and couldn't help turning her eyes to gouge out the South Imperial concubine. At present, the South Crane has no time to take care of himself. Naturally, he is not in the mood to pay attention to Pingji. Yin Beicheng straightened his clothes, got up, and stretched out. I'm going back to have dinner. I'm all gone. After that, he walked away. The South Crane also gets up to leave, but it is Pingji. The eel stands in the hall resentfully, and his eyes are as poisonous as the poison. He stares at the flower on the street who is about to leave. The flower on the street, however, seemed to be unable to see her resentful eyes. She crossed her and went back to her own hospital. She didn't know how many times she looked at Pingji's look. If she cared about it, because of one look, she would have died of anger. When she came back to the courtyard, it was dark and the dinner was ready. As soon as she came back, she quickly put the meals on the table one by one. Today, Emma Shanghua stayed outside for a long time, but she didn't have any food. She was really hungry, so she just sat at the table after cleaning her hands. Qin Lin, who was escorting Xueji, entered the house at this time. His brow was frowning and his face was not very good. Princess, the slave, just followed Xueji to the dungeon and found something. Emo Shanghua slowly sent a spoonful of soup to his mouth, but he didn't lift his head and said, "But what happened to the man I caught outside the city a few days ago?" The two men died last night. The hateful guards were afraid of provoking the anger of the prince and princess. They didn't dare to report to the police. Qin Lin nodded, with a look of indignation on his face. However, at least now he has caught the behind the scenes. I think those assassins are useless. Do you really think Xueji is behind the scenes? Emo Shanghua just raised her eyes and took a look at Qin Lin. Qin Lin's brow suddenly wrinkled more tightly, and the color of confusion could be seen between his brows. He found Xueji's parents well, but he remembers that before that, Mo Shanghua talked to them alone. Today's story, including the fact that Xueji's identity has been torn down, all he thinks is that it's the arrangement of Mo Shanghua. Xueji is not such a serious work of other countries. Now that Mo Shanghua says that, he is really confused. And Mo Shanghua saw this. She didn't put down her chopsticks and swallowed the food in her mouth. She just explained, Xueji was originally made by other countries. She and the assassins all have masters behind the scenes. This time, she just wanted to pull me down and get my private seal so that she could act in the future. Then, she was afraid that she would be close to the Lord. If she gets in touch with Yin Beicheng and gets Yin Beicheng's private seal, it will be a disaster. Qin Lin was surprised. He habitually raised his hand and touched the back of his head. Really, I didn't expect that it was true. What should I do with the princess, the masterpiece of other countries? With that, he took his hand as a knife and made a stroke on his neck, should it be. Emo Shanghua nodded gently, then shook her head again. It must be impossible to live, but before that, we have to pry out the behind-the-scenes master from her mouth. I'm curious about which country's work is so important and bright that it has arrived at the palace. Qin Lin felt his head more frequently, but the princess, the people she had caught were very hard. They were either dead or punished, and refused to speak. Emo Shanghua put a bowl and chopsticks, took a handkerchief to wipe the corner of her lips, and said, I felt for her, and looked at her walking figure. She doesn't know martial arts. Her fingers are thin and soft, so she shouldn't really suffer. I think she can't bear punishment at all. It's not impossible to pry out from her. You wait and get ready, and I'll go and have a look. Qin Lin nodded knowingly and was about to go down. After 2 steps, he suddenly turned around and went back to Mo Shanghua. He looked around her and said, Princess, I don't know why Qinya hasn't come back yet. I sent her to work outside the government. She should be back soon. And Mo Shanghua saw that he was worried and said, Don't worry. Qin Lin nodded, a little relieved, and turned to go out. And Mo Shanghua thought about it, but it's okay to go at this time. It's too late for fear of being suspected, so she walked out. Before she got to the gate of the courtyard, she saw Qin Lin standing alone at a corner. Because she was facing her back, She didn't know what he was doing. When he got close to him, he found that Qin Lin, who was always honest, was hiding here and secretly listening to the two maidservants. Mo Shanghua sees this, also can't help but erect an ear to listen to. Is Qin really in bad luck this time? No, Madame Ping has just been punished today. It's because of the princess's affairs. How can I see her? We'll have to go around Mrs. Ping in the future. Otherwise, we'll end up like her. What's going on? Mo Shanghua came late. After listening to the second part, he quickly pulled Qin Lin in front of him. Qin Lin was startled. He stepped back a few steps. Then he turned around and startled the two maidservants who were talking. He saw that he was running away with his head down. Qin Lin didn't care about the two maidservants. When he came back to see that there were flowers on the street, he knelt down and said, "Princess, I just heard them say that I met Mrs. Ping when Qin entered the mansion and was stopped. Now I don't know what the situation is. Please go and save her." Mo Shanghua Mao, in the moment, across the previous Pingji that resentful eyes, complexion suddenly a coagulation, go. While she was talking, she had already raised her foot and quickly headed out of the hospital. Seeing this, Qin Lin got up and trotted to catch up. At that time, Pingji was standing high in front of Qinya. You said that you were ordered by the princess to go shopping? What about the purchases? Qinya endured the anger in her heart and tried to keep calm. I stayed with the princess outside the house for a long time today. When I came back, it was late. The princess thought at that time that I went for a trip. But when I went late, the shop was closed. Naturally, I came back in vain. Pingji sneered, obviously didn't believe her words. It's really the people around the princess, and her voice is as smart as the princess, but her voice suddenly turned, staring at Qinya fiercely. You don't forget, you are just a slave, the master's speech and your excuse? In my opinion, it's clear that you're going out of the house without permission. What are you doing here? If you don't catch her quickly, hit her again and drive her out of the house. What she refers to and instructs is naturally the guards at the gate, but the guards are afraid of the flowers on the street. Pingji's words have fallen for a long time, and there is no action. Pingji's face turned black. She pointed to the noses of the guards and scolded them. You dog slaves, don't you dare to listen to me? How can there be such a truth in the world? You know what a crime it is to disobey the master, Mrs. Ping. Pingji's quarrel gave Qinya a chance to breathe. She tried to think about the way she dealt with the affairs of the stranger. She felt for a token from herself and held it up to Pingji. Whether the maid is right or wrong, it's not all decided by your mouth. This is the token given by the princess before she left the house, which is enough to prove that the maid is not selfish or you out of the house. Pingji purplish gouged out Qinya in front of her, as if through her to see her master, General, hate face distortion, actually directly raised his hand to Qinya in the hands of the token. Token. She is very proud of drooping eyes, stroking the token, and then handed it to the maid behind her. How come my wife didn't see any token? What a bold slave dared to deceive my wife. Qinya never thought that Pingji was so arrogant that she couldn't speak. Pingji walked around Qinya with great pride. Her hands came slowly to Qinya's hair. She grabbed her long hair behind her head and said, My lady wants you to know that you are different from me. Naturally, what I say is what I say. Qinya feels that her scalp is almost torn by Pingji, and the pain is unbearable. Her eyes are filled with big tears. She can't bear it, but because of her identity, she can't resist at all. Madam Ping, I'm a maid. I'm the one around the princess. If you dare to move me, I'm sure the princess won't let you go. For a long time, she could only endure the pain. The more Pingji listened to her, the more anger in her heart could not be extinguished. She directly left Qinya on the ground, and the witty one didn't instruct her to guard the bodyguard, so as not to blow her face. She only pointed to the maid behind her and said, You, take her back. After my wife has taught her a good lesson, I will sell her. As for where to sell, of course, only those places are worthy of being treated as such. Who let her be the person beside the slut, and happened to meet her, she was angry don't take her out, but also take who out. At the moment of Pingji's command, Qinya's delicate cheek turned pale, and the blood on her face faded clean. I want to see who dares to touch me. However, it wasn't long before Pingji's orders came down. Before she could carry them out, she saw the flowers on the street coming in front of the door of the palace very quickly. Even today's combed hair was blown in disorder by the breeze. The guards who originally regarded Pingji as nothing saw that the visitor was a flower on the street. They all knelt down to salute, and the maid beside her also knelt down to salute. Pingji Hate glanced at the flower on the street, or had to kneel down, see the princess. Mo Shanghua doesn't pay attention to Pingji. His eyes only fall on Qinya, who is struggling to get up and kneel down. At that time, Qinya's hair was scattered, her eyes were tearful, and she looked up at the flowers in the street. Mo Shanghua came forward and helped Qinya up from the ground. She wiped the tears on her face, and her eyes gradually cooled down. Qin Lin was also very anxious when his sister was abused. He was too busy to know where to put her. Xiaoya, what's the matter with you? Is someone bullying you? Pingji stood up. Some nervously pinched the handkerchief. Some guilty explained. This cheap maidservant went out of the house without permission, and there is no token to go out of the house, so I intend to punish her severely. Princess, it's clear that it's Mrs. Ping who robbed the maidservant's token of leaving the house. She insists that the maidservant went out of the house without permission and wants to take the maidservant back to punish him severely and sell him out. With the flowers on the street, Qin Lin felt a lot more stable in an instant, but he thought that if he was really sold, the place where he sold, she could not help tensing all over. Rao is a simple, honest man. Qin Lin, who is the only one to look forward to, can't help but blush with anger. He says angrily, Madam Ping is deliberately so deceiving people too much. Pingji quietly glanced at the look of flowers on the street, pinched her handkerchief, and tried to hold up her posture as a master. A slave dares to yell at my wife, princess. Don't you mean to connive? Mo Shanghua stares at Pingji coldly and says with no expression, What if it's connivance? Pingji, do you really think your position among the princesses is very noble? I tell you in my heart, but all the people I serve around me are more noble than you. After a pause, she stepped forward a few steps. A pair of quiet eyes seemed to coagulate endless ice cold, and it seemed to be quench poison in general. Only let people see. Then the heart was cold. What are you? Pingji's face couldn't be strained for a moment. Ben's beautiful face twisted little by little and said in a sharp voice, What am I? What kind of thing are you? It's all for my belly. What do you think you could be more noble than me? Obviously, he is also a mean person. He is used to brag with me here. Mo Shanghua seems to have heard a big joke. She gently pulls her lips and says, What if I'm a concubine? At least, I'm a princess now. You're not only from my concubine's belly, but also from the same fate in the end. Pingji's whole body couldn't help shaking. Beiqi bit her to the death, with a look of resentment to the extreme. The flower on the street seems to be invisible. The look in the eyes is calm again. She looks at the maid who doesn't dare to lift her head behind Pingji. Feeling the eyes of flowers on the street, the maidservant lowered her head, and the hand holding the token in her sleeve was full of sticky sweat, almost slipping out of her hand. Before Mo Shanghua came to her, she knelt down with a puff sound, and the token in her hand also fell to the ground. She cried out, Maidservant should die. Maidservant should die. Mo Shanghua doesn't pay attention to her begging for mercy. She leans down and picks up the token that falls on the ground. She takes the handkerchief and wipes the sweat on the token and hands it to Qinya again. When everyone thought that Mo Shanghua was going to give up, she suddenly said, Pingji dares to frame others with lipstick and white teeth in full view of the public. You should give an explanation. Pingji took a deep breath and said angrily, It's just a cheap maid. I just see that she doesn't like her eyes and deliberately humiliates me. So what? There are no maidservants in the world who dare to seek justice with the master. There were many servants in the palace. Her scornful words made people unhappy, especially Qinya. Now she was relieved. Her white cheeks were red with anger, but she took care of the overall situation and tried her best to endure. The flower in the street, smelling the words, slapped Pingji's cheek directly without thinking about it. Pingji's beautiful cheek suddenly showed a bright red fingerprint. Yu. Pingji covered her painful cheek and trembled with anger. Mo Shanghua just looked at her lightly and said, "I'm the main room, you're the concubine's room. There's a difference between the noble and the humble. Naturally, you can fight at will. What can you do?" The voice falls. Pingji is already angry. Almost on the spot will fall back in the past. Hate can't rush to tear the face of flowers on the street. But just that slap, let her mind clear and comparable, where dare to have half of the side of the change. The flower on the street seemed to appreciate something rare. After staring at Pingji's wonderful face for a long time, the corner of her lips gently drew a slight radiance, and then she turned away. "Princess," the maidservant just entered the yard, and they said that Mrs. Ping had just been taught by the princess and went to the prince to complain. As a result, the prince only scolded her for crying in the middle of the night, which was boring, and she didn't have any pity at all. Chinya arranges her hair, which was torn by Pingji before, and opens her mouth happily. What is expected, just let her toss about. Anyway, the Lord will not see her. But the flower on the street didn't think so. She said in a warm voice, "Today I'm late. I've wronged you. However, Chinya, you should remember that you are a stranger in the flower yard. No one can easily touch you. If this happens next time, you can just run away. I'll teach you some simple techniques of body protection." Before Chinya could thank him, Qin Lin began to smile, and his eyes were filled with joy. Great! As long as Xiaoyu has learned Kung Fu, he won't have to be afraid of those people in the future. You have to learn too. Seeing this, Mo Shanghua added, "If you don't learn, will you still need Chinya to protect you?" That's it. Chinya bent her eyes with a smile and joked, "If that's the case, how can you get your sister-in-law?" Qin Lin felt the back of his head with embarrassment, and his dark cheek was a bit shy. He just laughed and didn't answer. A few people joke a few words, just because of Pingji, and bring unhappy this just disappear. Since there is nothing else to do, Mo Shanghua goes to the dungeon again, ready to draw some words from Xueji. Only, she just arrived at the dungeon, just a little better mood suddenly sank to the bottom of the sea. The bodyguards in charge of the guard have been killed long ago, but Xueji, who should have been held here, has no trace. Mo Shanghua never thought that the person behind Xueji was so powerful. In such a short time, she received the news and quietly rescued the person. No, she should go to Yanbeiqing to discuss. So thinking, she directly let Qin Lin go back. Don't say anything. She is quietly from the window into the house of Yanbei City. However, she just jumped in the window, then fell into a warm embrace. Eyes are a pair of deep smiling eyes. "In the past, I used to go to you. Why? Today I'm thinking so much about you that I came to see you off." Mo Shanghua's white cheek suddenly turned red. He jumped out of his arms, stepped back a few steps, and kept a distance with him. "It's clearly you, rascal." Yin North City pick eyebrow, not anxious, not slow, of gathered together to her side. "Rogue again, how? If I'm not a rogue, how can I catch up with such a beautiful little lady?" With that, he could not help but grin at the corners of his lips and soften his eyebrows. Mo Shanghua is more timid. She turns her eyes and says, "I'm not here to talk about Feng Yue with you, but something important. Do you know Xueji has been robbed? And all the guards were killed." Yanbei City slightly nodded. His face did not see any unexpected color. "This matter, I already know. You let them go on purpose?" Mo Shanghua saw this and asked. "The guard of the royal palace is loose, and it can't compare with the external training of the dead. This is also expected. How can I stop it in the future?" Yin Beiqing leaned against the table behind him. His face was not satisfied, but in his deep eyes, the meaning was not clear. When he called himself I, he was back to the real him. But now he clearly called himself so. But he looked as if he was still the prince of the dandy in front of us. This made me confused. What does that mean? Yin Beiqing looked at her helplessly and raised his hand to her forehead. Why do you always know so thoroughly? Naturally, the less you know, the better. This person behind the scenes is far away from other countries, and you can't get in touch with him at present. The purpose of what he did is not just for you, but for me. Cash things are exposed, they will certainly stop for a while and start in another direction. After a pause, he continued, in any case, their ultimate goal is me, the kingdom of God. When you change your direction, there will be no threat to you. Why should you consider so much now? The flower on the street frowned slightly, and the color of thinking crossed in her eyes. It seems that it is true. I am narrow-minded. Just thinking about it, she saw a magnified, handsome face suddenly appeared in front of her. She was just a few breaths away from her. She was stunned. What are you doing? When speaking, the neck slightly shrinks backward with an unnatural look. When Yin Beiqing saw Mo Shanghua's appearance, he felt very comfortable. He stretched out his hand to hold Mo Shanghua's slender waist. I just want to ask you, today I didn't punish Ninhe severely. Don't you have any feelings in your heart? For example, sour or bitter? In a word, it's not very comfortable. Mo Shanghua had never been in touch with love before. At that time, he was just dull, not dull. Now he is clear about it, and he can hear his voice in a moment. What are you talking about? At this time, I can't help but push away Yinbei City, turn around and walk out. Who wants to eat your vinegar? Who said you were jealous? Yin Beicheng is not in a hurry. He slowly catches up with Mo Shanghua and takes her hand. You see, I haven't said anything yet. You think at first. I think it's clear that you have me in your heart. That's why you're so sensitive. Mo flower full Ingrun lips gently pursed. Unnatural, don't open your eyes. Silent ink did not say. She had to admit that she did have him in her heart. If not, she would have gone away. Seeing her acquiescence, Yin Beicheng was happy, and his hand holding the flowers on the street was also tight, like holding the most precious treasure in the world. It's late now. Since I'm here today, I'd better stay here. What? The flower's thin eyebrows on the street suddenly slightly frown, return the future and refuse. Yin Beicheng seems to see her intention in general, then pounce on her to the bed. Yin Beicheng, you. The flowers on the street were unprepared. They only felt the sudden turn of heaven and earth in front of them, and their body sank. As soon as they raised their eyes, the scene in front of them changed into Yin Beicheng's enlarged face. In front of this face, the facial features are exquisite, especially the eyes are very deep. The eyes are like the endless night outside the house. In addition to the endless darkness, there is a kind of bright light, which is very dazzling. It's a pity that the birthmark on his right cheek is as scarlet as blood, which completely destroys his beautiful face. It makes people afraid to see it, let alone notice his beautiful and delicate features. Once upon a time, Mo Shanghua had never observed his face in such detail. Now they're so close to each other, and they are interlinked. She can't help but raise her hand to caress the scarlet and terrible birthmark on his cheek. It is said that because of this birthmark, he was disgusted by the emperor from the moment he was born. All the princes around him lived in the imperial palace and grew up in an Enlele. Since he was a child, he was denounced in such a remote place, and even never entered the imperial city for so many years. However, the slightly sticky feeling between her fingers made her heart jump. Before she had time to think about it, Yin Beicheng suddenly got up again, took off her shoes, and pushed her to the side of Mo Shanghua and conveniently removed her shoes. Go to sleep. He lay flat beside Mo Shanghua, the scarlet birthmark on his cheek just facing the other side, leaving Mo Shanghua a handsome side. The flower willow eyebrows on the street frowned and raised his hand to touch his side face. Just now that sticky touch has been lingering in her heart. She is really strange. The house is not hot. Yin Beicheng cheek, just no sweat. Why there's a sticky feeling. However, before he touched Yin Beicheng's cheek, he caught the hand of Mo Shanghua and turned to face her. There was a thin sweat on his full forehead. You little goblin, Do you want me to put you in the right place? Mo Shanghua's face suddenly changed. She quickly pulled her hand back, turned over and got out of bed, turned her back to Yin Beichong, and said, "You, take a rest yourself. Qin may still be waiting for me. If I don't go back, she will be so sleepless tonight." With that, he fled and strode to the window, jumping out of the window like Yin Beichong, who used to sneak into her room. I fei. Yin Beichong looks at Mo Shanghua's back in a hurry. He cries with heartache in his mouth. However, he doesn't have a look on his cheek. After Mo Shanghua leaves completely, his fist that he has been hiding in his sleeve is loosened and his palm is slightly red. "Ma'am, you can use this hot egg to apply it. It took me a lot of effort to get it from the kitchen after seeing my face. It was cooked by me after I asked for it. Those people didn't care about the life or death of our people." The maid held 2 eggs wrapped in a handkerchief, and her face opened with anger. "I've said it several times. I don't want this broken egg. Hurry up and get my Yuyan ointment." Pingji's cheek swelled badly, and her pretty face was full of anger. When she saw the 2 still steaming eggs, her anger became heavier. Seeing this, the maidservant quickly covered the eggs in her hand. She was afraid that Pingji would be angry and smash the 2 eggs. "Madam, all the good things in our hospital were compensated to the princess last time, and all the monthly cases were deducted. Now there's only 1 base left for Yuyan ointment. You can only use it once, but if you want to use it, you have to use it all the time. Otherwise, it will be useless. It's not that it doesn't work." Speaking, she slowly hung a bit embarrassed color on her face. "Our hospital is now poor Jingle Ring, and there is no money to buy Yuyan cream." Pingji's face suddenly turned green. She grabbed the dresser box on the table and wanted to fall to the ground. However, one hand touched the dresser box, and his eyes caught a glimpse of the poor jewelry in it. He was angry and distressed. He took back his hand and had to pat the desk heavily to vent his anger. "Where are my parents? Haven't they written yet?" Like catching some straw, Pingji's eyes brightened and asked. The maid shook her head and lowered her head slightly. "Girl, you're going to marry the king as your concubine. The master and the wife have said for a long time that they don't recognize your daughter. Even now, they don't pay any attention to you." She said this with great care. She was afraid that Pingji would take her out if she was not happy. They are really angry with me." Pingji's cheek was green and white, ugly, and her body trembled. "Well, in this case, I don't recognize their parents. Now I don't even have the money to buy a bottle of Yango in my broken yard. That bitch made it clear that she wanted to use it to force me to death." There's a saying that money can make the ghost push the mill, but now she is poor. She has no extra money except for living on the daily food in the house. How could she get a foothold in the house? Think of here, Pingji 2 hands can't help but tightly clench. Hate eyes red. "Bitch, I won't let you go." Now, without the favor of the Lord and the money to live on, she has fallen to this point. It's the slut who has done her harm. When she is in power, she must have skinned her. However, how can we gain power? As if suddenly thought of something, her eyes suddenly a bright, lips gently hook a radiant. "Bitch, don't think I must take you have no way. Look at it. As long as I got the power, there are ways to deal with you." At this point, she seems to have no anger in her heart. She took the eggs from her maid's hand, wrapped them in a handkerchief, and gently applied them on her swollen cheek, showing her teeth in pain. Originally, the swelling injury was not too serious. After 2 days, Pingji couldn't wait to dress herself up again from head to toe. Then she asked her maid to find out the news and wandered in a pavilion in the garden of the palace. After waiting for half an hour or so, Yin Sichuan turned out slowly from behind the pavilion in front of him, surrounded by a crowd of attendants. Looking at Yin Sichuan, who has a handsome face and gentle eyebrows, Pingji's heart starts to ripple. She stirs her handkerchief and walks forward gracefully. "I have seen your highness." Yin Sichuan looked at Pingji, who was standing in front of him. He was still so gentle and peaceful. However, he was as gentle as jade. Facing a vicious woman who had only seen her once, he just nodded his head. Then he bypassed her and continued to walk forward. Seeing this, Pingji quickly stopped Yin Sichuan. Your Highness, I have something to say to you. Yin Sichuan side eyes to see Pingji, her heart slightly happy. A few steps forward, the distance between the two people closer, attracted Yin Sichuan cannot help but back a few steps. Seeing this, Pingji showed some innocent color on her face. Your Highness, I know you can't live without people, but it's really important. Yesterday, Yin Sichuan saw Pingji's face. He knew what kind of person she was and naturally doubted. When he thought about yesterday, he could not help thinking about the flowers in the street, but he did not avoid them. Please tell me quickly, madam. You and I are embarrassed after all, so it's against the rules. Pingji sees this. The eye-tail stirs up a bit of potential in the color that Musket walked a few steps forward again. This time, Yin Sichuan did not escape. However, no one thought that Pingji had just stepped forward 2 steps, and her feet seemed to trip over something. With a cry of surprise, she fell into Yin Sichuan's arms. At the moment of this change, everyone did not expect that even Yin Sichuan had no mental preparation. Subconsciously, he raised his hand to catch Pingji. However, he didn't know whether Pingji was too heavy or not. He just grabbed Pingji's wrist and wanted to support it, but she suddenly overthrew him to the ground. Your Highness, Yin Sichuan's body is how precious. Behind a group of people see this, busy all flustered God. All hands and feet will come forward to help. Your Highness, Yin Sichuan's body is how precious. Behind a group of people see this, busy all flustered God. All hands and feet will come forward to help. Pingji lies on Yin Sichuan's chest, and her clothes don't know why. Because of this accident, she spreads a lot. The scenery on her chest is clear. She doesn't rush to tidy it up. Instead, she just grabs Yin Sichuan's skirt and looks frightened. I really don't want to be a man. With that, tears rolled down her cheeks full of powder. However, she only focused on acting, but did not notice that Yin Sichuan, who had been put under her body as a human flesh cushion, was getting pale with a kind of morbid white cheek, and her hands on the ground seemed to be bruised, breaking a thin layer and oozing a layer of blood. Chen Kong saw that Pingji didn't plan to get up. He pulled Pingji down and threw her aside without any pity. He stepped forward to help Yin Sichuan. Your Highness, what's the matter with you? But what's the matter with you? Yin Sichuan couldn't take care of the wound on his back. He just covered his chest and nodded with a pale face. Pingji noticed Yin Sichuan's pale face and saw that he had a wound on his hand. She was so flustered that she rushed forward and covered Yin Sichuan's wound with a handkerchief. She pretended to tie it on him. Your Highness, yes, it's a maid, isn't it? How's your body? Is there anything wrong with it? Unexpectedly, it's okay if she doesn't fasten her kerchief. Now, Yin Sichuan's thick eyebrows suddenly frowned tightly. There's a little pain in her eyebrows, and the blood color of her lips immediately fades away. Seeing this, Chen Kong immediately locked his eyes on the handkerchief. He quickly pulled off the handkerchief and yelled, "Come on, pass on the Imperial Doctor." Pingji then remembered what she had done on the handkerchief. Her face turned white and she sat down on the ground. Looking at the group of people in front of her, her voice echoed like a bell. It's over. It's really over. In her heart, she was lamenting for herself, but her eyes suddenly came to the corner at the end of the crossroad. On the plaque hanging in front of a courtyard, the word Wu Yuan was very conspicuous. Her mind quickly turned. There was a lot of activity here, which soon attracted the attention of the dockyard. Not long after, she saw Mo Shanghua rushing out with people to check. Pingji saw that. While Mo Shanghua was not here, she grabbed the handkerchief on the ground and ran away. However, instead of escaping to the courtyard where she lived, she turned around the gate and sneaked into the courtyard from the corner gate behind. What's the matter? Looking at Yin Sichuan, who was surrounded by the Imperial doctors in front of him, he quickly pulled a little guy and asked. Seeing this, the young man said quickly, I don't know if I'm going back to the princess, but it seems that His Royal Highness's stubborn illness has broken out again, and the Imperial doctors are watching. Mo Shanghua looked at Yin Sichuan's pale face. Lume suddenly frowned tightly. She stepped forward and said in a loud voice, "This is not a place to see a doctor. In my opinion, it's better to take your highness back first and treat him well. If the wind blows here all the time, I'm afraid it's easier to aggravate your highness's stubborn illness." One of the royal doctors, hearing the words, immediately nodded. "That's reasonable. Hurry up. Ask someone to find a stretcher." Qin Lin, you take them to the dockyard to carry a soft shelf and bring some people to help. Thinking that the people who followed them were not from the palace and were not familiar with the palace, Missouri Shanghua called Qin Lin to come. "By the way, take my medicine bag, too. Look at Yin Sichuan's situation. I'm afraid it's not very good. Just in case, she'd better prepare in advance." Qin was going to call Qin Lin, but as soon as she turned her head, she saw that Qin Lin had already gone. She said, "Princess, the medicine bag is in your room. It's inconvenient for my brother to go. I'd better go and get it." You have to go, and come back quickly." Flowers on the road nodded slightly. At that time, Pingji had just entered the dockyard through the corner gate, when she found that most of the people in the dockyard were instructed by Qin Lin to work for Yin Sichuan, and Qinya was the only maid that could serve in the dockyard on weekdays. Therefore, except for a few rough servants, the dockyard was almost empty, which naturally gave Pingji a chance to take advantage of. Her hands were hidden in her sleeves, her fists clenched, and she didn't know what she was holding. Her face was slightly nervous. She was very careful to avoid the maid who was washing clothes in the backyard, and sneaked into the main room where Mo Shanghua lived. It's the first time for her to sneak into the room of Mo Shanghua. The porcelain bottles in her palm are wrapped in a thin layer of sweat because of her tension. As if she's going to get out of her hands at any time, she quickly pinches again, lightens her steps, tries not to make the slightest sound, and slowly walks towards the bedroom. When she arrived at the bedside of Mo Shanghua, she stopped and held the small porcelain vase in her hand. She was nervous and resentful. "Mo Shanghua, I didn't expect that, but since it has happened, you can die with me." With that, she picked up the embroidered pillow on the bed and put the porcelain bottle directly under the pillow. "Just want to take back in a hurry just now, with Yin Sichuan bloodstain of PA to Z together into them." Her eyes flashed and flashed. Can't help but pinch PAZ, murmur to oneself, "No, I can't die. Want to die also can only be that bitch himself to go to hell." Thinking of this, she was busy thinking about it again, and then bent over to get the kerchief back again. Under this bending, her eyes would flash. Between her fingers, under the satin-embroidered pillow, except for the two objects she had just put in, a corner of paper appeared. Pingji jumped in her heart and quickly pulled out the paper and opened it to check. After seeing it, her face suddenly changed, and her nervousness suddenly disappeared without a trace. A very vicious smile rose from the corner of her lips. "Flowers on the street. Flowers on the street. This time, I think you are immortal in dying." Then, fearing that someone might come in at this time, she quickly folded the paper in her hand and put it in her inner garment. She took out the porcelain vase under the pillow. After the pillow was restored to its original state, she wanted to leave. Just after taking 2 steps, she turned her eyes and stopped. She put the vase into the potted plant in the house and left. Just arrived at the door. The future has to go out, then head-on ran into the footsteps of Chinya in a hurry. The two almost ran into each other. "Mrs. Ping." Chinya stepped back 2 steps, waiting to see the comber clearly. Her face immediately became suspicious. "How can you be here?" Pingji somewhat unnaturally avoided Chinya's suspicious eyes, cleared her throat, took out her own posture as the master of the house, and said with half a good face, "I'm just here to apologize to the princess. Why are you so nervous?" He found a reason for himself. Pingji didn't calm down a lot. "The people in this courtyard are getting more and more unruly. They didn't ask when they came in, but now they meet you again. When you see my wife, you look up and down. It's true that the upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked." She gave Pingji a bad look and then walked away. She came to the princess to say hello, but she got a cold reception and became angry. She couldn't see another plan. Even so, Chinya's eyelids kept jumping, and she felt uneasy in her heart. She quickly went to the inner room and checked the clips up and down in the room. However, after a long time, she did not find what was missing. Nevertheless, she always felt uneasy in her heart, so she secretly wrote down the matter and planned to report it back to Imo Shanghua later. Yin Xinchuan's illness made the emperor feel pity for him since he was a child. No matter where he went, he was accompanied by a royal doctor. Now he is such a thing again. As the princess of the mansion, Imo Shanghua naturally wanted to have a look, and Yin Beicheng was invited as soon as possible. As soon as he entered the room, he was full of anger and yelled, "As soon as my brother 13 came to my house, he suffered from this disease and that disease again. How did you serve him?" Yin Beicheng was seldom angry, but now he was so angry about it that all the people in the room immediately knelt down. Imo Shanghua raised her hand and pressed her eyebrow. She went inside and asked one of the imperial doctors who was dispensing medicine, "What's the matter with your highness? I don't think it's a simple disease. It seems that there are some other reasons." The imperial doctor raised his eyes and glanced at Imo Shanghua. His face was slightly unhappy. "I will tell you about these things like the prince later. The princess will go out for a while, so as not to affect our diagnosis and treatment." After all, the imperial doctor was from the imperial city. He had heard about Mo Shanghua in the imperial city before, but now he didn't pay attention to her. Chun Kong, who had been waiting for him all the time, came up and said, "Princess, it's really not suitable for you to be here. You'd better go out and wait. The two imperial doctors are excellent doctors in the imperial city. You can rest assured." There was no anger on the flower face, but his eyes crossed the imperial doctor who was dispensing medicine and looked at Yin Xinchuan lying on the bed. At that time, Yin Xinchuan was not in a complete coma. He seemed to have some consciousness, but his face turned from pale to red. His forehead was full of sweat, and his brow was wrinkled. He looked very painful. Next to the two maidservants, one was wiping sweat, the other was constantly changing towels. And that another imperial doctor, at the moment, took out the acupuncture bag, as if to give Yin Xinchuan acupuncture. Imo Shanghua's eyes were fixed on Yin Xinchuan's flushed cheek. He felt that it was wrong. He went directly over the imperial doctor and picked up Yin Xinchuan's wrist and put his finger on his wrist. Unexpectedly, her hand was just put on Yin Xinchuan's wrist, and he grabbed the hand of Imo Shanghua with his backhand. His eyes were closed all the time, and then he opened them again. The originally clear and gentle eyes were now full of a layer of misty color, and the eyes were blurred, as if they had been bewitched. Imo Shanghua was shocked, and subconsciously he wanted to pull out his hand. But Yin Xinchuan, who was always sick, didn't know where he had the strength to grasp her hand. He couldn't get rid of it. "Qian." He looked at the flowers in the street with blurred eyes, whispered gently in his mouth, and his cheeks were burning, more ruddy. He was drugged? Imo Shanghua, eyebrow heart, mercilessly jumped to jump, turned ahead to see to still hold the imperial doctor of acupuncture and moxibustion bag behind. The imperial doctor's face changed when he was frightened by the accident. He put down the acupuncture bag and went forward to break Yin Xinchuan's wrist. On the other hand, he said anxiously, "Just now, the imperial Dr. Zhang has made it clear that she doesn't want to bother the princess. Why does the princess want to make trouble here?" Although he was trying to break Yin Xinchuan's hand, he didn't dare to make any real effort. For fear of hurting him, Yin Xinchuan's hand still didn't move. "You can't use this brute force." Seeing this, the imperial doctor who had just been dispensing medicine jumped his feet in an instant and scolded, "Quick, stab the acupoints with silver needles. Let her highness sleep for a while." Trouble. Imo Shanghua didn't look like others panic. She soon calmed down as if she were juggling. As soon as she turned her backhand, her green fingers slipped out of Yin Xinchuan's palm, and her fingertips quickly explored between his wrists, and then she took them back. At that time, Yin Xinchuan seemed to be stimulated. More and more beads of sweat were on his forehead. When he was just pulled away, he could not help but raise his hand and went to pull his collar. In his mouth, he said vaguely, "Hot, hot." Seeing this, the two old imperial doctors hurriedly pressed Yin Xinchuan's hand to grasp the collar. But just after pressing this hand, the other hand slipped out again, pulling at his lapel. I think it's better to let your highness sleep for a while first. The imperial doctor who dispensed the medicine saw this. He took it and just threw it on the table. He was about to come forward, but Mo Shanghua stood in front of him and spoke calmly and quickly. It's useless to let him faint temporarily. If you don't find a way to crack the poison, your highness's body will be greatly damaged. The doctor's face turned black. What do you know? It's better than going to a doctor in such a hurry. Don't wait for the imperial doctor to finish. Mo Shanghua directly interrupted his words and looked at Qinya, who followed him. Go to prepare a bucket of cold water. Go quickly. Yes. Qinya nodded and hurriedly trotted out with her skirt. You want your highness to soak in cold water? Still pressing Yin Xinchuan's hand and foot's imperial doctor to see, can't help but wondermouth. Another royal doctor's face suddenly changed, and he scolded loudly. Your highness has always been in bad health. Do you want your highness's life like this? Absolutely not. Get out of here. We'll treat your highness here, and he'll be safe. Mo Shanghua looked at the imperial doctor in front of him with no expression and said, If your method works, it won't be delayed to poison hair. Don't worry. Your highness's life is also related to my life. Naturally, I won't let him have an accident in my hands. Speak wild. The doctor's face was dark, and he didn't plan to give in. We have been with your highness for many years, and we are most familiar with your highness's physical condition. Your highness's body is weak. If you are soaked in cold water like this, you will definitely die. In addition, you will never be able to endure the recurrence of old diseases. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.